Greetings and welcome to the Open-Minded Skeptic podcast. My name is Sharon Ann Rowland and I'm your host. Today on our podcast, I will be sharing some highlights from an interview I did in August last year with the magical, hardworking and omniscient Karen Kay, more commonly known as the Fairy Lady. Karen is a former BBC news editor who founded her own international fairy magazine called Fae, F-A-E. Fae magazine, to be precise. Her fairy journey began in her grandmother's garden where she used to make fairy perfume as a young girl. Karen is also related to renowned fairy poet Walter De La Mare. To find out more about this amazing lady, check out her website, www.karenkay.co.uk. Now, I hope you enjoy our highlights. So, we've got to start with the ultimate question. Karen, do you believe in fairies?
Let me think about this. Yes, unequivocally. That's a long word for this morning or this evening. Yes, I do believe in fairies. And actually, no. I don't believe in fairies. I know that fairies exist because belief implies an element of doubt. But I definitely do know that they exist.
So you would call that a personal truth?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. I have that with too. As I said, I've had contact experiences. And I've always said about my contact experiences, I don't expect other people to believe me, to be honest, until they have their own experiences. Because I think until you have a personal truth moment with some type of high strangeness, you really can't make that assumption. You can't really, it's a bridge too far for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people associate it with childish, like fairy tales and things like this. But you know what? You don't have to have the experience to believe, because a lot of people say, oh, seeing is believing. But actually, believing is seeing as well. If you turn that around, when you have that belief, you're actually more likely to see. And I know people can say, oh, that's because your mind wants to. But my fairy experiences where I've seen them, I haven't even been thinking about them, and it's happened in quite random situations. So I'm really used to it now. But equally, I, like you say with your experiences, I don't have to prove it to anybody. I'm not trying to prove it to anybody. I'm just living my life. I work on a daily basis with the fairies. And, I think I'm pretty sound. I'm not too bonkers. And, people accept that. I get lots and lots of people contacting me, sharing their own experiences. And for some reason, I'm not sure what it is, but people feel shy, embarrassed. They don't want to come forward, but they contact me and they say, oh, at last, somebody who believes in fairies, somebody who's connecting with them, and then they share their stories. So I know for a fact there are a lot of people more than who, I can't know how to say this, a lot more people than you would think who actually do have that connection and have their own encounters with fairies. So it's really quite interesting.
I find if I'm at a dinner table with a group of people and I'm brave enough at some point to say I've had a contact experience but not anything else, I'll find by the end of the night at least half the table has pulled me to one side and told me their story. Is that the same with fairies?
It is in a way, yeah. I've had UFO experiences and contact as well. I'm not going to talk about it now because it's a different subject, but I've had that, and there are only very few people that I can talk to that, about that, because it's another, for me, it's like, that's something else. It's like it's a bit way out there. Whereas for you, it's like fairies, like, oh no, but
exactly, yeah.
For me, fairies are, they're a part of life. They're there are so many stories through history, and actually in modern history as well. Like, have you ever heard of Findhorn in Scotland?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Okay. So I mean, that's a huge, I've never physically been there, but I read a book many years ago called The Magic of Findhorn. And in that book, it explains how when they first went there, it was dust. It was, the ground was not fertile. It was pretty much like desert. And they connected with the spirits of the land, the fairies, the elementals, the devas, whatever you want to call them. They connected with those earth energy beings, and the vegetables and the plants and the flowers that they grew there were bigger than you would get. And they didn't use any growth stuff or anything. It was just purely growing on sand, working in harmony with the elementals. So there are some kind of, what I would say, factual examples of humanity working in harmony with fairies, and every single thing that grows, there will be a fairy guardian, a nature angel, an elemental, whatever name or label you want to put onto it, helping. It's a bit like the life force. It is the life force. So we have a life force. Without our life force, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't do anything, depending on what your belief is in how we are as humans. And it's similar for fairies and plants. So the fairy is almost like the life force of a plant. That's in very primitive terms.
No, I actually refer to my experiences as, I don't usually call them ETs, I call them energy entities, because that's what
energy entities, did you say?
Yeah, that's how I refer to them, because when I've been on paranormal investigations and when I've actually had contact, I've felt this energy, and it feels the same to me. So I also have a theory which no one agrees with me, Karen, so don't feel the need to try and help here. I've got this theory that all of the high strangeness is basically all this same energy, that based on our upbringing and our experiences and the religion that we're raised in, like if you're a Catholic person and you're from a very devout family, I think you're more likely to see an angelic form. But if you're like me, I was actually raised Catholic, but I didn't really do much with it after 19. So I've really been more of an agnostic. I believe there's some great power out there, but I'm not sure if it's like a god, a man with a long white beard. So basically, that's why I think I've been able to have contact with more creature-likes, like a grey and a mantis and a tall white, so a variety of different kind of ETs. Whereas other people, like my friend Rick, who's been into sci-fi and like the paranormal and ghosts and thrillers, he has had a lot of energy entities in the form of ghosts. And so my personal theory is that what we're all contacting is this energy, but based on how we manifest it in the form that is most likely for us to be receptive to. But as I said, you don't have to agree with me on that, Karen. That's just how I kind of reason the world.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, actually. And there is something that I say about fairies as well, is that, like, people say, oh, do they have wings? And that, the typical kind of depiction of what fairies are based on Victorian times. And sometimes, yeah, they do. And sometimes they don't. They will show themselves to you, if they want to, in a way that will be acceptable and recognizable to you. So that does tie in a little bit with what you're saying. Ultimately, everything is energy, everything, and it's clothed in different ways and will show itself to you in different ways, in a way that resonates with you. And if you're putting out there, like, I want to see an angel, and then perhaps you are more likely to see an angel. And if you say, I want to see a fairy, perhaps you're more likely to see a fairy. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, how people see things, but there is an element of your vibration will attract the same kind of similar vibration, in the sense of like attracts like. So if you have that little kind of fairy shape space in your aura, then perhaps a fairy will appear to fill it, perhaps.
It's interesting that you mentioned Findhorn before. I don't know if you're aware of this, but where I am at the moment, where I'm living in Brisbane, we actually have a small community of ex-Findhorn people.
Oh, no, I had no idea about that. Oh, that's interesting. So what do they do then? What are they doing there?
Well, most of them are actually passed on.
Oh,
but,
sorry, I'm not laughing.
Not
Bless their souls. Bless their souls. I'm not laughing at that. I'm just...
But I actually went on a spiritual road trip about almost 2 years ago with a lady called Tess, who was from Findhorn, and so we're on the road going to all these different spiritual landmarks around New South Wales and Queensland in Australia, and I'd hear all the Findhorn stories, and she would tell me all about the gentleman you've heard of Nexus magazine.
Yes, I have. I'm not sure if I've seen it, but I've certainly heard of it.
Well, the founder of that, the father, not current Duncan Rhodes, but his father was an original, one of the co-founders of Findhorn.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting.
Well, that's what Tess told me, so maybe I shouldn't have said that until checking. But that's what I was kind of informed. And but no, it does sound like it was quite a magical place. Sadly, Tess isn't very well, so she's otherwise I'd put you in contact with her too, because you might be able to get some original stories. So I can't, but I remember as we were like driving around, and she just popped up with a little bit, and she said exactly what you said before, that basically everything just came out of the earth. It was a magical place, and so I think you're right. Have you actually been up to Findhorn?
No, I've never been there. I've only read the book. It is one of my places that I'd like to go to. It's definitely on the list. I think because I'm in the UK, anything that's in the UK, it's like you can have friends that live around the corner and you don't see them for years, but you can take a plane and travel across the other side of the world. So I do need to go there. I don't like the term bucket list. I don't like that term. I will say it's on one of my list of places that I'd really like to see in my lifetime.
So are you based in Cornwall?
I am, right down the bottom at the ends of the earth, that little bit at the bottom of the UK, yeah.
So are you anywhere near Redroof?
Yeah, I am actually. Probably about 20-25 minutes away, depending on the traffic, yeah.
That's where my mum's from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, small world, isn't it? I was born in Southampton. My brother was born in Portsmouth. So, yeah, that's where I actually started my life, down that area. So. Oh,
gosh. So you are English?
Yes. I came, we emigrated in, when I was about 13.
Oh, wow. Okay. You've got a very strong accent. So you've picked up the accent.
Oh, yes. I think if you go through the school system, it disappears. My brother, who is 5 years older, he still sounds like he's from the West End or East End or whichever one.
Oh, that's amazing to know. Yeah, have you heard of Carnbray, a place called Carnbray?
Yes.
So I went there, apparently, I went there the other day, so I know that it's there, but I didn't know this. I've lived in Cornwall for many, many years. I'm originally from London, but I moved to Cornwall, I think, just in my early 20s. And I'd never been to this place, but there's a place called Carnbray Castle, and it's actually a restaurant. They've turned it into a restaurant. It's so magical there. Like, it is so magical there, and it's literally like perched on these boulders, and you feel like, gosh, is it going to fall off the top of the cliff? But it's so lovely. You just reminded me of that. I only went there last week for the first time. So you must go there if you come back to the UK again.
Yes, I think I went there before it was a restaurant, and I must have been like 7 or 8, or so. Although when you're a 7 or 8 and you're being dragged around to all the old family homes, you know,
it doesn't hold the same charm or intrigue, does it really?
No, I'd like to do it. I did come back in 2006, and I went to Stonehenge and checked out all the daggy sheep. So I had no idea there'd be, you know, for some reason I just didn't imagine there'd be so many sheep around it. It was quite funny. So, and they weren't particularly attractive, were sheep. So.
I haven't seen sheep there. I've only been a couple of times. I don't know if they still have them there or not, or whether they were just on a different field when I went there. But that's funny.
It was. There was. I'm not joking. There was about 100 there that day. I was just thinking, my God, what is this normal? So,
it was on that day.
It was meant to be. So
definitely.
We better keep going, or we'll never get this done, will we?
We digress.
Would you mind giving us a little overview or brief overview of fairy belief in the UK?
Okay, so obviously I can't speak for everybody in the UK, but I can speak from my own experience and my own perspective. So what I've been involved in is, it's like a fairy uprising of humans who feel that they are part fairy or have a very close connection with fairy, and like we feel like we've got fairy blood in us. And that isn't so bizarre as it might sound, because if, for example, I don't want to digress too much, it's so easy when you're talking about fairy to just go off in lots of different tangents, but I'll just briefly summarize this. So for instance, in Ireland, you would, and in other places actually in the UK and probably all around the world, you would hear tales of the little folk, the little people, who were actual physical people who then kind of became the fairy folk, if you like. So some of us believe that we still have those genes, the DNA of that within us, which is why we have this strong connection to nature and feel like a kinship with the fairies, because we believe that we are that, or we're part human, part fairy, because the fairies bred with the humans as well. So there's another angle to look at it. So anyway, there's this kind of, I don't want to say subculture, there's a fairy culture in the UK that is growing. I organised my first kind of proper fairy event back in 2006, and I didn't know if anybody was going to come to that event. At the time, I just felt very isolated in my own beliefs, if you like, and I didn't feel that anybody really understood, or people would laugh, or there wasn't anyone else like me. And I set up this event and it literally sold out, and lots of people came out of the woodwork, out from the hills, from wherever they were, and they all pretty much said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. I had no idea there were others like me. You know, like when you're meeting a lot of people who you don't have to explain anything, you just get each other, you know what the deal is, kind of thing. And from that, this surge, it's just grown, and it's continually growing. And I did the first fairy festival in the UK in 2007. Like, I mean, a proper festival. Lots of events call themselves festivals, but they're actually indoor events. They don't have camping and stuff. So I did a proper festival with outdoor camping, stages, this sort of thing. And everyone came, and that was pretty much the only one. There might be one or two other little ones for children going on, but nothing like the one that I was doing. And now there are loads of them. Like, it's just taking over, and they're popular events, and they're attracting people, using the word the mainstream, kind of normal people who want to go. Usually it's because their children like dressing up as fairies, but that's an entry point. So it doesn't matter to me. You know, I'm not bothered if people come because they like Disney's Tinkerbell or because they want to know more about the goblins or whatever it is, as long as they're coming in, because for me, when you connect with fairies, it's about connecting with the environment, and the environment is so important for humanity's survival. So it's, some people think, yeah, fairies are twee and they're all this and that, and there is that element to it, but there's actually a very serious aspect to fairies, and that is the survival of humanity, which is a pretty powerful thing to say. I didn't know I was going to say that till I said it, but it's true.
How old were you when you had your first experience with the Fae then? And was this the experience that kind of guided you down this path?
Well, I was a young girl when I had my first experience, probably around the age of 4 or 5 years old. Obviously, it was a very, very long time ago, but actually the memories... the memories from that time are very, very strong. They've stayed with me, which I'm really grateful for, because they were really precious. And I used to spend a lot of time with my grandmother. She lived in South London and had a beautiful garden, and she loved flowers and roses particularly. She loved roses, the natural roses. And I just remember being out in the garden with her a lot, and it always seemed to be sunny, or perhaps we just never went out there when it was raining. But my memories are being in the garden in the sunshine, and then gathering rose petals as they were falling from the plant, and I would gather them up and I would put them in a little pot. I can't remember what I put them in, but I used to create fairy perfume for the flower fairies. That was my little offering. So I formed my connection with fairies at that young age. It hasn't been a constant thing, because when I got into my late teens, I kind of didn't want to know them, in a way that I didn't think they were cool and they weren't hip, and I was really, cared about the latest fashions and all this sort of stuff, and to believe in fairies, just I didn't think it was very cool at the time, but they still did not go away. So just because I was like, no, you're not cool, you're not making me look cool, but they stayed. And so I believe that they have steered the direction, all the twists and turns, and opened lots of magical fairy doors in my life that have led me to the position that I'm in now. And I'm really grateful for that, and I can't imagine it being any other way.
I'm a big believer in that synchronicity to connection and relationships too. Pretty much everybody I interview on the magazine, once I've spoken to them for a little bit, there's a connection somewhere. So it's so I believe that you're meant to have certain people in your life, or to learn something from a certain person as you go. And I think there is that guide. A lot of people refer to them as a spirit guide or something, but in your case, it's if you do have the Fae blood, it probably is a fairy. Fae or fairy.
Either really. My magazine is called Fae, F-A-E, and that stands for Fairies and Enchantment. So, but lots of people spell it in different ways. You can do the F-A-E, which is more connected with the Celtic lands and the association there, but equally a lot of the time I use this common spelling of fairy. Some people say that the Disney-esque spelling of fairy, F-A-I-R-Y, and that kind of stems from the fair folk, the fairy folk. There's lots of reasons to use different words, and ultimately They don't care what they're called as long as it's respectful, and it's whatever you feel comfortable with. So I will often flip between the various spellings of fairy depending on my mood at any given moment. But usually, when I'm kind of doing public work, I will use the standard commonly used fairy spelling, because people immediately understand what that is. So they know if I say I'm Karen Kay the fairy lady, then they'll say, oh yeah, we know what that is. They understand it. So if I say fae, then some people will understand that who are more into it, but people that aren't into it might not understand what that is.
No, I've always referred to them as the fae.
Yeah.
And but then that might be, I've got quite a lot of Irish heritage on my mum's side. So,
right. Yeah.
That way. And of course, we, unlike the Welsh, we like our vowels. Would you mind sharing with us how you work with the fairy energy, and how tactile is it? Do you actually feel something when you manipulate it?
Okay, so I do feel when I work and connect with fairy energy, with the fairies, I do physically feel something, and the way I describe it is there's a few different elements and some new things that have come in recently, which I'll share after I've described the feeling. But the feeling that I get is like a fizzy electric feeling. So it's like not in a painful way, in a lovely way. So it's like fizzy champagne. When you get lots of like do you call them goosebumps, or when you get all tingles on your body and stuff like that. So it feels like that, but inside as well, and it's very fizzy. So I kind of can feel when they're around. And the different types of fairies, I mean, I tend to connect with a certain type of fairy, so I'm familiar with their energy. It's almost like that's their calling card. More recently, over the last few months, I get a scent, and I know people associate this with when people pass over, and then maybe they'll get the scent of lavender, and that's the perfume that their grandmother used to wear, or something like this. I get smell of toffee apples and candy floss.
Wow, that's a good smell.
Oh, honestly, and it's there's no doubt that it's there, and I'll be there, and I could be anywhere, like in the middle of the city, in a supermarket, or not near the toffee apple stall, of course, but I could be anywhere. In fact, I was in my car yesterday, and I suddenly got this, it just filled with toffee apples, and I thought, where is that coming from? And I always do it every time, like, where's it coming from? And then I realize what it is.
Well, that's all for our podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a positive review over on iTunes for the Open-Minded Skeptic. My team and I look forward to entertaining you once again in our next podcast. To check when our next podcast is, simply head over to www.tomspod.com. That's www.tomspod.com.